Where will the top free agent quarterbacks land in 2025? We'll tell you in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the app, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. And I'm thankful that you guys are listening to this podcast on a Thursday or maybe on Friday after you've stuffed your belly full of turkey and all the good stuff. But Kate, on today's show, we're going to be breaking down where the top free agent quarterbacks are going to land in 2025. And let's start with your guy, Aaron Rodgers, who is set to become a free agent next year. He says on the Pat McAfee show that if he plays in 2025, the only team that he wants to play with are the Jets. First of all, do you believe him? And number two, where do you think he is going to play next year?
I don't believe him. I don't think anybody's like, I want to play for the Jets. Not right now. There's a lot of turmoil here. And I think the main thing with Aaron Rodgers is going to be like, the Jets shouldn't make any long-term decisions about their organization based on who Aaron Rodgers gets along with and who he likes. And like, I think the organization really needs to be done making decisions based off what Aaron Rodgers wants. And I think that this season kind of made that pretty clear on most fronts. So Aaron Rodgers is probably going to have to deal with either a incoming regime who did not bring him to New York, was not a part of that orchestration, was not part of what drew him there. And he's going to have to go with a new organization that has to make a decision. Do we want to hang our hats on Aaron Rodgers after this colossal failure? I don't think any of that's going to work. But like Aaron Rodgers, where is he going to fit in? So like, not been his best season, 21st percentile in terms of PFF play action grade this year. Not great. 25th percentile in terms of positively graded throws per PFF, middle of the pack pretty much everywhere else. Like, he's not creating magic. He doesn't look like Aaron Rodgers again. What he does look like is a 41-year-old quarterback who's, going to be 42 here. Is that right?
Yep.
Like, he looks his age, guys.
Yeah. Sorry, 42 in December of 2025, just to be clear. So let me try to think about how I want to phrase this. Do you think there are going to be multiple teams after him next year?
Yes, because he's Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers is generally associated with winning. Do I think that is misguided? Absolutely.
Do you think he's going to want to go to a team that's already established? Or do you think there will be a team out there that's already like a fringe playoff contender or a contender that wants to add him to their roster? Or do you think it's more likely that he goes to a team that is, a bottom 5 team in the NFL? Because here's what I'm looking at, Kate. Like, I'm looking at a couple teams like the Giants. I don't know where the Giants are going to draft. Right now, they are currently drafting at number 2. We'll see what happens throughout the rest of the season. Do the Giants draft a Shedeur Sanders at 2? Or do they draft somebody else there, a Travis Hunter, and bring in Rodgers as almost like a stopgap option? Like, you're not looking at him anymore as a franchise guy, but like, hey, he's better than Tommy DeVito and Drew Lock. We'll bring him in for a year as we kind of reset our roster. Do you think that's possible?
I only wonder, like, I think that would be a solid option for the Giants because then they get to prioritize filling the other holes. And then, once they've done that, the quarterback is kind of going to be the last big piece of the puzzle there. Do I think Aaron Rodgers wants to do that? No, I think Aaron Rodgers probably wants to go to an organization where he feels like he could just come in and win. I'm going to throw out like a team for you, and I want you to tell me how insane I am to consider. Seattle Seahawks, who I like I like Geno Smith a lot. I think probably one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the league. But could you picture them being enamored with the idea of an Aaron Rodgers? They've got kind of a great situation under Mike McDonald. We know his defensive scheme. Like, there's a lot to like, I think, in general about Seattle. And if they don't think Geno's a good quarterback, if they don't think he's the quarterback that's going to take him to the Super Bowl, could they be one of these like surprise teams that just gets enamored with the potential Aaron Rodgers experience?
I think the team would revolt because Geno Smith is like one of the most well-liked players in the league.
Okay.
And frankly, he's just a better quarterback than Aaron Rodgers. But I think
I agree. To be fair, I agree. I don't want to send Aaron Rodgers anywhere because I think he's probably going to make your team worse. Another team then. Again, tell me how crazy I am. Indianapolis Colts. They have already done this with.
See, that one makes more sense to me. And I could see that being a good situation for him in terms of like, hey, this is a running team. You're playing in a dome, and I think you don't have to worry about the weather as much. Come be a starter for a year as we try to rebuild Anthony Richardson. I think that one makes sense. I'm going to say this team because the Raiders are some team that would make sense to me in the fact that like Mark Davis loves big names, and I don't know if they're going to have a chance to draft a quarterback and, a quarterback that's a long-term answer. Could they bring in Rodgers for a year as they rebuild the roster? It seems like a very Raiders thing to do, as they always go after older players. And I could see Rodgers wanting to live in Las Vegas and be a star. And I think that makes sense as well.
Can I just tell you that would probably be the funniest? Like, Aaron Rodgers has the chance to do the funniest thing ever. Like, that's the moment we're in right now. The idea of Aaron Rodgers going to Las Vegas where, Devontae Adams had just been traded away to the Jets to chase Aaron. Like, the idea of it is great. Now,
I got one more team for you. I got one more team I want to ask you about.
Don't say the Steelers.
Your Pittsburgh Steelers. We know when Mike Tomlin and Rodgers get in these games, they just can't stop making the eyes at each other. They're just blinking over and over. We know that they love each other, but do they love each other?
They don't love each other. I think Aaron Rodgers would be a terrible, terrible fit for the culture in Pittsburgh. I think they're building what they want around a guy that has an attitude like Russell Wilson, who's like the ultimate team player. Russell Wilson could not be more opposite Aaron Rodgers in terms of the locker room presence. I think the Steelers, just given their history of players with off the field stuff, I think
Rodgers is off the field stuff. There's all there is just
it's the
noise.
Media circus. It's the Pat McAfee show. It's the vice presidential candidate. Like, it's a circus. It's an absolute circus. Not Pittsburgh's monkeys, though. Not Pittsburgh's monkeys. I think the biggest question is there any environment that you could pluck Aaron Rodgers into and envision him returning fantasy value?
Yes. But I think he would need to start to surrender a little bit of control and realize that he's not the same quarterback that he was 5 years ago and become more of a game manager, right? Like, we don't need you trying to throw the ball 35, 40 times a game. Just come in and be efficient and make the plays. And that's why, honestly, Kate, I think your mention of the Colts is probably my favorite, because that's kind of what Shane Steichen wants to do anyways. They want to run this RPO offense where the ball gets out quick and they take shots down the field. I do think he could go to the Colts, and I don't think he would be fantasy relevant, but I think he could be the type of quarterback that helps Jonathan Taylor continue to be effective, that gets Michael Pittman the football, that gets A.D. Mitchell some shots over across the middle of the field. That is one of the few spots that I do think could work.
Yeah, I think Aaron Rodgers would generally be I mean, it's scary to say, but he would be an upgrade for the fantasy
Yes.
weapons in
Yep.
that offense in
Yes.
a big way. But the reason it wouldn't surprise me is just because this is kind of what we already saw them do with, Joe Flacco. And I
Yep.
think Aaron Rodgers, like, I don't know how much better he is than Joe Flacco, but maybe a little bit, maybe a
Maybe.
little bit better. But at least then, like, you kind of have the more recent superstar um, than you have in
Sure.
Joe
Sure.
Flacco. I could picture it.
All right, let's talk about your Pittsburgh Steelers, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, both who are expected to become free agents in 2025. Where will they land? We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit fanduel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. This is a fantastic week to join FanDuel. I love the games on Sunday. Bengals Steelers is a really fun divisional matchup. Later in the afternoon, we get Ravens Eagles, which I couldn't be more excited to watch. And then, of course, 49ers Bills on Sunday Night Football. Go to fanduel.com and never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. On today's show, we are breaking down the top free agent quarterbacks going into the 2025 offseason and predicting where they're going to land. Kate, let's say that Rodgers does land with the Colts. That's one of our landing spots. Now we can take some of these other names off the board. Russell Wilson, who is your starting quarterback. You are a Russ fanboy. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely fair. Yes.
Okay. Where does he land in 2025?
As boring as it's gonna be for you, I think he lands right back with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mentioned in segment 1, I do think that the Pittsburgh Steelers are building something special in the locker room right now. And I think that's something that Mike Tomlin values very highly. Some of the offensive woes I don't think are all on Russell Wilson. There's obviously some scheme things. It's kind of boom or bust right now, but I also think part of that's some of the play calling. I think the red zone play calling in particular has been pretty abysmal overall. Not scheming a ton open. Doesn't really feel like they're utilizing their players to the best of their ability. But like Russell Wilson, you have seen him shine in this offense. But I think most of all, what you've seen from this team is a buy-in from the locker room. Like this locker room seems all in on Russell Wilson. You had Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, like calling him up and being like, yo, you ready to win? Like they're bought in. George Pickens, so bought into Russell Wilson. And I think that's so important. And when you see some of the play that we have out of Russell Wilson, it hasn't all been perfect. Had some rust in certain moments, still takes sacks. But all in all, I think the good has outweighed the bad. And we're seeing Pittsburgh passing game take on a new shape than we've seen. It's the first time we've seen this kind of passing game that looks like a real NFL attack for the first time since Ben Roethlisberger retired.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think
It's boring, but it's true.
Yeah, I think Russ likes playing in Pittsburgh, and I don't think he's done anything bad enough over the last couple of games, even though he has not played great, to think anything otherwise. It seems like they want to get him back. My guess is, Kate, that he'll take a relatively cheap deal compared to the rest of the market, maybe closer to 30, 35 million a year on a 2-year deal. And that's just what Pittsburgh's going to do as they try to continue to extend this window. Again, is it the most exciting destination? No, but I think you're probably right. The one that I am a little bit more curious about is Justin Fields, who is the backup right now, who I thought played generally pretty well. in the first 6 games of the season. Where do you think he lands in 2025?
How about the New York Giants, who I don't know if they're the answer. I like maybe they're just kind of ready to hit the reset button at quarterback entirely. But if they're looking to build a long-term roster and fill things out before they answer the quarterback position, I think Justin Fields could be a really intriguing stopgap option for them, where you get to hit reset, see what you have in this guy. You get a relatively cheap veteran who has NFL experience, who offers that dynamic run playability. Pair him with an elite wide receiver. I think that could be a really interesting pairing just from like a financial perspective, especially while they try to sort of build out the rest of their NFL roster through the draft.
Yeah, I can see that. I think that's a good one. I want to go back to the NFL draft for a second, because I think by most accounts, there's only 2 quarterbacks in this class that are even worthy of being drafted in round 1. And again, we're still like 5 months away, but that's Cam Ward from Miami and Shedeur Sanders from Colorado. You look at the current draft order, Kate, and it's Jacksonville at 1, the Giants at 2, the Raiders at 3. I've got to assume that you're going to have at least one quarterback drafted there. And the other teams that need quarterbacks down the line, like the Jets, the Browns, somebody like maybe the Dolphins who want to get a better backup quarterback, they're just going to be left out of the quarterback market in round 1. And I think that's where Fields is interesting. Like, for example, the Jets and the Browns have such bad cap situations right now where they're not going to be able to sign a big time player, and they're not high enough in the draft to select a quarterback. So maybe a Fields with the Jets makes sense as like a bridge quarterback. Bring him in on a 2-year deal. Let him be a functional NFL quarterback until you get your cap situation right. Same can be said for the Browns. Same might be said for the Saints, who are drafting right now at pick, I'm looking 9. I think the Saints are $90 million over the cap in 2025. Maybe they move on from Derek Carr and just try to get a stopgap option. I actually think Fields is going to have a lot of interest as somebody, hey, get us through the next season, and we're going to find our next franchise quarterback next year. I think teams will be interested in Fields.
Yeah, and I think especially with the kind of recent run that we've had of, I don't want to say like failed quarterbacks, but we've seen a lot of players who were in less than ideal situations with their first NFL teams finding a lot of success in the league right now. Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, like we're seeing.
Even go back a
Jared
couple years,
Goff,
right? Yeah,
like
Ryan Tannehill, when he went from Miami to Tennessee, turned his career on. I think it's becoming more popular than ever.
Yeah, I think a second chance, or a third chance technically.
Yeah.
But I don't think the Pittsburgh job was ever really truly his. I think Mike Tomlin always intended to give Russell Wilson a start. So I'm not going to count that against him as having lost his starting job. There's going to be, I think, plenty of interest. My final prediction for Justin Fields is the New York Giants.
I'm going to go with the other team in that state. I'm going to go with the Jets.
Okay.
Because
I think the only team in that state is technically the Bills, but
well, that's true. I guess New Jersey, right? I'm also going to put Cleveland on that radar, because we'll see if Jameis Winston comes back. I think they're going to have to grab somebody else, because Watson's probably not going to be ready for week 1 if he's even on the roster. And I think Fields could provide a cheap option. Is there anywhere that you could see him going where he would be super fantasy relevant in 2025?
I think on his own, he's just fantasy relevant regardless of situation because of his rushing upside, right?
What about, okay, could you see him going to a situation like Miami where he knows he's going to be a backup, but he's behind a quarterback that can't stay on the field, and he could go play in an offense that has a ton of weapons?
Do you think he can execute Mike McDaniel's offense?
No. But I think Mike McDaniel also might realize, like, hey, we've got to get a better backup quarterback in there. We can't afford Aaron Rodgers. We can't afford Sam Darnold. So Fields is our best option. And even though it's not a perfect fit, it's better than Tyler Huntley and Tim Boyle and Skylar Thompson and all the other names that they've thrown out.
Maybe. I think this whole conversation has just kind of made me not want. I don't know that there are a ton of like super exciting landing spots here for Justin Fields in general.
Let's talk about Sam Darnold, who I think most people are going to consider him as the top free agent option this offseason. Where will he land? We'll discuss that next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. I absolutely love Gametime. It's the only ticketing app that I use when I want to go see my favorite teams play live. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. There's so many great features on the Gametime app, but one of my favorite is the all-in pricing. You're going to know exactly how much you're paying up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Plus, you can get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy. I love sitting in the end zone when I go to NFL games, but I don't want to be where the goalpost is blocking my vision at all, so I have to make sure that I get the right seats in the Gametime app. You're going to know exactly what your seats look like before you buy. Plus, they have the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. One in the morning with Tyler Rowland, one in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcast. All right, Kate, let's run through some other names here. Sam Darnold, who I view as the best option here in free agency. Where do you think he's going to land?
This is so challenging because I do think that like he's found sort of the perfect scheme fit, to work himself into, to rebound his career. Hasn't always been perfect at times, but we've seen more of the Sam Darnold that we thought we were going to get with the Jets. That being said, like let's just kind of roll down like the Sean McVay coaching tree. I feel like that's a great place to start.
Actually, that is where I'm going to start.
Sean McVay?
Yeah.
Rams? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I know that obviously Matthew Stafford not going anywhere, and this isn't like an indictment.
Are we sure?
On.
I mean, he is 37, and he's had a lot of injuries. He's had some stuff happen to him off the field. I know he's talked about retiring in the past. Are we sure that Matthew Stafford is coming back next year?
I guess we don't know for sure.
Every year we get a quarterback or two that'll retire or take a year off. That's maybe surprising. I wouldn't be surprised. I also wouldn't be surprised if let's say theoretically the Rams don't win the NFC West and they go 7-10. If the Rams look at it and say, "Hey, maybe it's time for a reset," and maybe Stafford decides to come back and they trade him and he goes somewhere else. I'm just not ruling out the Rams doing something wild because this is what the Rams do.
That was kind of my favorite potential spot, but I wasn't really all that certain if I was being too crazy, too cuckoo with that. But I do think it's kind of the perfect fit. Like Kevin O'Connell's scheme is derivative of that of Sean McVay's, and I think that that's kind of a big part of his success. He's thriving in that specific system. And again, like contingency plan might not be the worst idea given, he's had some back injuries. He's had a lot on his plate. He's not getting any younger. If the team does look like it's headed in a rebuild, maybe that is when Matthew Stafford says, you know what, like I ain't got time for this and heads out. I
just want to mention, and again, a lot of this stuff is just trivial, but like Sam Darnold went to high school in Southern California. He played college football at USC.
Mm,
As soon as he was a free agent, he went to LA to play with the 49ers. I think it would be pretty cool for
Cali boy.
him. Yeah, I mean, he is. Would it surprise me if that was a situation where he would like to go play with the Rams? And maybe Sam Darnold at this point in his career knows that his options are running out. So even if he has to go sit behind Stafford for a year, which seems really weird considering how well he's playing, but knowing that that's his long-term job, I wouldn't rule it out because he's probably only going to get one more chance to be a starting quarterback. So he's going to want to pick a spot with a good coach and good weapons around him. I'm just not ruling out teams like the Rams for Darnold.
Yeah, I think that's fair. How about Mr. Daniel Jones himself, who is
Backup.
officially a free agent? Backup.
I think he's a backup quarterback to a team that has maybe an injury-prone quarterback or an older quarterback. I think like Buffalo. Buffalo doesn't really count as either, but like I think Buffalo would make sense behind Josh Allen. I think the Ravens would make sense. I think the Dolphins would make sense. I view him as a high-end backup quarterback moving forward.
I think, yeah, I could picture him being the backup for a team that has like a mobile quarterback, because you could kind of work that skill set that he has into that game plan. And it doesn't feel like, like Lamar Jackson, if he goes down to injury and then you had like a pure pocket passer behind him, that flips the script on your entire offense, right? So I think like the goal is always to get this backup in the mix that has a similar skill set. Nobody's going to match Lamar Jackson, obviously,
Nope.
but like a player that you can utilize his athleticism in addition to his arm, like that seems like it kind of makes sense.
I think
Um,
Arizona is a good situation. Like go play behind Kyler Murray, right? Kyler again had not been the most durable, but I just don't see. Hold on, I gotta give you some breaking news. We're this is coming out on Thursday, so you guys will already know. But Daniel Jones is signing with the Vikings. It's an
wow.
interesting spot.
That's very interesting. Huh. Okay. Well, I'm glad we didn't go too far in the weeds here on Daniel
But
Jones.
to me, honestly, that's a good fit for him long term because he's going to be playing behind JJ McCarthy right next year, assuming that McCarthy's healthy, coming off an injury. I think that would make sense.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. One of the things that I've liked about JJ McCarthy is that I think his, general athleticism, low key, he can move. He can scoot a little bit. So yeah, maybe that's a good fit. Let's close it out talking with Jameis Winston, who I'm assuming we're not getting any breaking news about here in the coming minute. Jameis Winston, is the best spot for him just to remain with the Cleveland Browns?
Yeah, probably. Although again, I could see teams like the Giants and the Jets um, signing him as like a stopgap until the draft, like just in case they don't get anybody in the draft, or even if they do, like let's say the Jets end up trading up and getting Shador Sanders, but they don't want to necessarily play him right away. I think Jameis Winston makes some sense there, but I have to believe if he continues to play well in Cleveland, the Browns are going to want him back just so they at least have a baseline quarterback production there. I think that makes sense.
2-2 as a starter so
Not
far
terrible.
this season.
2
Um,
divisional wins. Browns, Steelers. Oh, sorry, Steelers, Ravens.
and you have to be really kind of impressed with the fact that he's doing this, I think, with a pretty limited cast of receivers, right? They traded away Amari Cooper. We like Cedric Tillman a lot, but like
Yeah.
he's a second-year player who this is his first time kind of being a wide receiver one. Elijah Moore, love his hands, but he hasn't been a consistent option. Like Jameis Winston, I think, is making a little something out of a less than ideal
I agree.
circumstance. I think he'd be a great fit to remain in Cleveland. And he's an option that I think would be cost effective, and also an option that like I don't think you would feel bad, or if you're trying to keep the dream of Deshaun Watson alive, like
Sure.
he's a guy that I don't think is threatening enough that you can kind of
No.
and the
I'm not worried
facade.
about him.
You know, like I think he's a good mask
Yeah.
if they're trying to figure that situation out still.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosier. Enjoy your Thanksgiving, and we'll see you right back here on Friday to break down all of the action from Thursday.